We have this incredible tool called Masculinity. And if you want to look at another tool like a hammer, it can craft a beautiful home or an incredible piece of furniture that is a piece of art or enjoyable to sit on as a piece of furniture. But also you could crack a man's skull with a hammer. So is it the hammer that's the issue, or is it really the way in which we wield the tool? Help guys understand the tools that are available to us and learning how to use those tools righteously for the betterment of our own lives and the lives of other people. Harrison, what's up, brother? Thanks for joining me on the podcast. I've been following Save Your Sons for quite some time, so to be able to have this conversation is going to be incredible.
Ryan, man, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm still a little bit in shock because I've been listening and following you from way before I ever started. So if I come across as like as a fan, that's because that's really how I'm feeling. So thank you for having me, man. I'm honored and I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah, well, I hope I live up to the expectation. There's always this thing on.
Nobody ever
well,
really
this
can
thing on social media where no, you can't, because you always put your best foot forward, and people have these assumptions about who you are, positive or negative. And so you meet somebody in real life and you think, oh man, this guy's exactly what I thought he would be. Or alternatively, this guy is nothing like I thought he would be. So we'll see where we land on that scale here after this conversation is done.
Yeah, dude. I'm all too familiar with the people project what they want you to be when you're online, which I've noticed is funny.
And I think it's okay, is if it's inspirational and motivational and it helps people get to a place that they're interested in going, I think that's good. But I also think that there is some deception that takes place in the world of social media. And I'm not going to say that I'm immune to it. I've fallen prey to that, and I've created that a lot myself. And so over the last several years, just really trying to be more genuine about who I am, but also sharing the failures and the setbacks, not just the victories and the things that go well.
That's one of the things I've admired watching you as a fellow content creator is that you do that so gracefully. And I think it's such a balance, because you and I have exchanged, I think, comments on Instagram before where we're like, I try to be myself. I've definitely never said anything that's not true about who I am, but like the real me is a guy who, if somebody's like talking crap under my thing and I think you're an idiot, like I want to like dunk on you and be like, like if somebody leaves a bonehead comment, I want to be like, well, fuck you, man, like whatever. But then at the same time, we have to think, well, is that really who, I do all this stuff for my kids. I want them to see kind of how I lived and the good things and the bad things. I think, well, is that really the guy I want to portray? And there's a lot of internal strife that I experience back and forth when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Well, I think that's a really good point, because there's the man that you want to be and that we all have an aspiration of becoming. And just because you're working towards becoming that person doesn't mean you're disingenuous. You hear a lot of this authentic, be genuine, be vulnerable, which, we can have that discussion. But I don't think a man who's attempting to be aspirational and work towards something is inauthentic just because he's striving to be different than he is today. But I do believe that a lot of people have a vested interest in ensuring that you stay exactly how they perceive you to be, because that's what they're comfortable with.
Yes. I think that really gets to it, dude. They paint some picture of who you are. And I'm like, it's funny, dude. I'm not Catholic, but the other day somebody posted like my favorite Catholic accounts, and I was on there. I'm like, like, I don't know where you got that. Like, I like Catholics, I'm friends with Catholics, but that's not me. But that points to the bigger thing of like, you are who you are, Ryan. I'm who I am, Harrison. But to other people, when you're in this sort of public facing role, you become something else. And how do you? I don't have the answer, but how do you be real, but also not mislead people and not dash people? Because I think I want people to get something from what I say and to improve their own lives from what I post. But I don't want them to think I'm saying something that I'm not. And where is that balance?
Where do you think the concept of you being Catholic as your account Save Your Sons is? I mean, obviously it's more traditional in nature. I think there's even posts in there that are a throwback to traditional masculinity, traditional gender roles. I'm wondering if it comes from that as opposed to something else. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I try to be very careful enough about what I say, but also not trying to censor myself or overthink it. You know, you want to shoot from the hip a little bit, but you also want to be like, well, for better or worse, a lot of people might see this. I want to be aware of that. I think, I don't know, man. I believe in God, but the way I think about God is probably different than a lot of people. And I'm friends with a lot of Catholics, and I've worked with Catholic businesses. And so maybe they made that association and it stuck for them. And if that helps them, I guess that's good. I guess I'm okay with that. You know, that's the way I think about it is, you know, project onto me what you need. And if that helps you, then who am I to stop it?
Yeah, well, there's worse groups to be associated with, so that's not entirely a horrible thing. Where did the concept of Save Your Sons come from? You know, and I'm sure as you've grown your account and it's reached millions and millions of people, I'm not sure if you had that expectation or if this has surpassed what you thought was possible. But there's probably a couple of different camps. One camp is probably all on board. That's the camp I happen to sit in. Another camp is probably thinking, save him from what? There's nothing wrong. In fact, if anything, we need to be more progressive. We need to change because these outdated, stereotypical masculine roles are dangerous and destructive to our young boys. So tell me a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, I mean, what I always talk about is all I can talk about is my experience. And I try to stay away. Dude, I don't know how much time you spend on X, Twitter, but over there,
not much.
Good, smart. Over there, it's just turned into, it's nothing but just like left versus right. And there are just people who spend all day arguing about politics. And the way I think about it, man, like from where you and I sit, the change we want to see in the world, we're not going to make that change by going online and fighting with people who either are trying to convert people who are never going to convert to what we believe and what we think, or just getting pats on the backs from people who already agree with us. And I've never seen my role as a pundit, political commentator, for better or worse. I'd probably grow faster on X if I dipped my toes into that water, but it's not what I'm interested in. For me, it was always I came of age. I'm a firm millennial. I'm 37. I'll be 38 in 6 months. And I grew up in the participation trophy generation. That was me through and through. My parents tried their best. They did a great job. I love my parents. I never say anything negative about them, especially not publicly. But I came of age at a point where I was given a very specific message from schools and from society and from media about what it means to be a man. And it was the front end of that sort of more progressive, more where the old ideas of masculinity are bad, they're outdated, they're toxic. That was the very beginning of that. And so I like any kid, man, I was impressionable. And in my early 20s, I believed every word of it. And I was like, oh, I need to be nice. I need to be a lot nicer. If I'm just a good boy and I do what I know I'm supposed to do, then I'll get what I want out of life. And slowly, as I entered my early 20s and was on my own out in the world, I realized that I was nice. I thought I was nice, but I wasn't getting what I wanted out of life. I wasn't getting the results that I wanted out of life. And it wasn't, honestly, man, I think the early days, this was like 2013. When did you really get going?
2015.
Okay, so I would have come across you right around then. But some of those early guys talking about stuff like, you know what? Actually, if you're a man, you're going to have a lot better time just spiritually, mentally, not to mention physically and in your relationships, if you're trying to get stronger. If you're actually challenging yourself to build something. If you're actually trying to improve yourself. And that those self-improvement messages that really nobody in my generation had ever heard until 2013, 2014, when it started popping up online, that's what changed everything for me. And so I was like, the first thing I did was I started lifting weights at 26 years old. I'd never really done it before. And almost immediately, like the very first lift, you get your first pump ever, and you look in the mirror and you're like, oh, I did that. That's because of me, and I feel better because of my actions. And that agency was something that was completely foreign to me. That idea that if I wanted something, I was going to have to actually do it and work for it. And that was kind of my first taste of all this other, them telling me that these old school, what it means to be a man stuff is bad. That's not true. And I want to know what's true. And the more I explore, the more I was like, actually, most men are a lot happier and a lot healthier and a lot more successful in their relationships and more successful in their business if they're leaning into what it means to be a man and they're not shying away from it. And these old conceptions of masculinity, they existed for a reason. Our ancestors were smarter than we give them credit for. And more men are discovering that every day. And to the extent I can play a role in that, I'm very grateful.
Do you believe that there's a concerted effort, whether it's conspiratorial in nature or just a bunch of independent actors working to undermine and erode masculinity, or is it simply a byproduct of the current times that we live in? I mean, let's be honest, our need to really step up as our ancestors did is not as great as it once was. And I've got a friend, Jack Donovan, who says, in this day and age, you have to choose to be a man. Before, you didn't have a choice, either be a man or die, or get people around you killed. And that's not the case today. So is there a concerted effort, or is it just the situation we found ourselves in because good men have come before and created this type of environment for us?
I think the good men, hard times, bad men, that heuristic is very, very useful. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think when you talk about where we are right now as a society, this is why I love podcasts, because I love the longer form, because you can actually speak with some nuance versus on Twitter or on Instagram. Even on Instagram, you kind of got to be like, yeah, like here's my thing, and you miss all the nuance. But it's a combination of stuff, dude. It's environmental. I mean, you just look at like the average testosterone levels in men today versus our grandfathers. Of course, they're declining, and a lot of those are environmental factors. And are you saying, is someone really going to say like that was intentional? Maybe, but it's also, you follow the money. It's convenient to have to make things out of plastic. The plastic gets into our water supply.
Sure.
Yeah, like so is that part. But the result is men who are less comfortable, maybe even less able to embody a lot of those masculine roles and ideals that were so ubiquitous throughout human history. So that's one cause. I do think that there is an effort in media and politics especially, but really all of our institutions, to change what the definition of a man is. And you can get into what their motivation for doing that is, but the end result again is a lot of confusion. Young men coming along being like me, dude, and that was 15 years ago. It's gotten so much worse now, or 12 years ago. It's gotten so much worse now. But guys come along and just have this really wrong conception. Like, it's actually pretty good what men are called to do, and if we perform the role that we most naturally fit into, that has net benefits for society. But guys are confused, and women are confused, and everybody's confused, and they don't know who they are. They don't know what's true. And I think a lot of that comes from media. I think a lot of it comes from the schools. I think a lot of it comes from government policies. And is it intentional? Well, it definitely benefits the people in power. So if you wanna think about it like that, is follow the power, follow the money, follow the power. If I was a bad guy and I wanted to control a population and keep my power, well, I certainly would want to erode spaces where men could speak freely amongst themselves. I would want to erode spaces where men would improve themselves, and I would want to confuse men so that they would shy away from getting stronger because they'd be less able to defend themselves. So is that what's happening? I don't know. The people making those decisions are in a club that I'm not in. I'm not there for those decisions, but you can connect the dots.
Yeah, I I was going to say, I don't know if the motive matters, but that's not entirely true. I think the motive does matter. If you understand the proper motive, and it's hard to articulate and understand what people's motives are, but if you do understand the motive, then I think it's easier to combat and fight against, or it might just rile you up enough that you actually do something about it, you know?
Yeah.
But I tend to agree with you that it's probably a bit of design, and it's probably a bit of just the environment in which we live that has been created as a result of our really easy times. And that's not to discount what anybody might be going through. I know all of us go through challenging times at different points in our lives, but the risks associated with the type of lives that we live today are significantly less than what they were 100 years or 500 or 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, that's another point that I try to make, but the nuance is always lost. Like, I like old pictures. I share a lot of old like illustrations,
Right.
Americana, because I do think it harkens back to a feeling that is healthy, a feeling of pride in where you're from. And I'm from the South. I don't hide it. I'm proud of it, and I'll never apologize for it. But so I think there's something to be said for having this sort of shared American experience and people and wanting people to be proud of that. But I also don't think that everything was great back then. I certainly don't think that everything was great 500 years ago. When people want to get really, return to tradition, well, like, the closest thing to a plague that we had was the pandemic that shall not be named. Back 500 years ago, it was like 10% of every fighting age man died every year because in violent conflict. And that kind of stuff isn't happening right now. We have our own set of challenges, but the child mortality has improved drastically. Modern medicine has done a lot of great things. Science is freaking good. Like I'm skeptical of science when there's a ton of money involved, but the actual discipline and what they're actually studying, if they're doing it the right way, is great, and it can help a lot of people. And so that's another bit of nuance that I think is important. Is there's a lot of things we can learn from the past. But let's not forget to be grateful that we happen to live in a very prosperous time, a very resource-rich time, and it gives guys like you and me the chance to look around. Like you couldn't have had a massive podcast. I mean, the podcast didn't even exist, but like it would have had to been a radio
20 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do this,
and now we can, and that's pretty freaking cool. And I want to always verbalize my gratitude to be in a position like that. Because guys like us now, we can help people. We can share what we think in a way that influences people that wouldn't have been possible ever before.
I always get a laugh when you hear people who say, "Oh man, I wish I lived 300 years ago." I'm like, I don't think so. I mean, it might sound pretty romantic right now.
Yeah,
exactly. And neither would I.
No, hell no, dude.
I mean,
no
let's
way.
be honest. It sounds really romantic because we watch movies like Braveheart and Gladiator and these other ones where the hero emerges, but those are horrible, horrible living conditions. I do not want to live in those times. And like you said, we have so many opportunities. I wanted to go back to something you said earlier about masculinity, and the way that I view it is it's simply a tool. It's this incredible tool that we have been blessed with, whether you believe that's through being created, as I believe, and it sounds like you do as well, or an evolved species. We have this incredible tool called masculinity. And if you want to look at another tool like a hammer, it can craft a beautiful home or an incredible piece of furniture that is a piece of art or enjoyable to sit on as a piece of furniture. But also you could crack a man's skull with a hammer. So is it the hammer that's the issue, or is it really the way in which we wield the tool? And I think you're on the same mission as I am in a different vein to help guys understand the tools that are available to us as a matter of birthright, and learning how to use those tools righteously for the betterment of our own lives and the lives of other people.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And it's such a smart, just realistic way. Let's look at what exists. Let's look at the facts of existence as close as we can prove them. And masculinity is absolutely like you say hammer. I've said chainsaw before. I like that. It's
same.
Like chainsaws. You can be who was it? Friday the 13th. Who's the one that had the chainsaw and he went and killed everybody? Or you can.
I don't follow like Freddy or Jason. I don't know too much, but sure, yeah.
or you can, if there's a hurricane, you can go get somebody who's trapped behind a house because you have a chainsaw. You can get the tree off of their house because you have this really
Right.
powerful tool. And is like any other tool. Any other state of being is what do you do with it? And for me, that was a realization that I came to. It was like, well, it comes with a responsibility. If you have a chainsaw, or if you're really good with a hammer, you have a responsibility to use it safely. Same with firearms. If you're really skilled and you have a bunch of firearms, well, then you understand inherently the responsibility that gives you. And I feel the same way about this body that I was born into and this brain that I was gifted. Is I'm failing our Creator if I don't do everything I can to search for what's true, try to spread that truth, and try to make this world as good as I can for my boys, but also for everybody else who comes after.
Why do you think there's such a large faction of people who seem to rail and fight against the concept of manliness and masculinity?
I think a lot of them are just doing what they hear. I think a lot of them are repeating the popular narratives, and I think to the extent those narratives are intentional, the purpose of those narratives is to weaken resistance to power. I think that's a reasonable conclusion to come to. I think other people probably are hurt, and they might have a bad example of somebody using that tool of masculinity poorly, which of course those exist. Of course they do. If you're around a bad man growing up and he's way stronger than you and he doesn't have any sort of value system and he doesn't care what happens to you and he hurts you, it's very understandable that you would grow up with not only a warped conception of what a man is, but also a belief that men are dangerous or men can be really, really harmful. So I think that gets to another important role that we have is how can we flip that example and show people that, well, there's another side to that coin, and all the great things on Earth too. A lot of them come from the effort of men. And that's what I want my boys to be proud of. That's what I want. That's probably the core of my message is you should be proud of this, of being a man. It's a good thing, and it gives you a lot of power, a lot of responsibility, but a lot of ability to change your circumstances.
Yeah. Have you seen this bear versus man debate? Have you looked much into that? What a crazy thing. It's absolutely ridiculous. But the reason it got brought up is I saw this. Well, I'll say it this way. And it's important to know because I think a lot of men see things like that and they take it so far to the other side that they become nice and passive and subservient to women and culture and society. And that's a problem. So I watched this video the other day on Instagram, and it was this guy that it seems like he has a fairly large following, and it looks like he likes to hike. And he said, when I hike out in the woods, if I come across a woman maybe by herself, I step off the trail and I slow my pace down. I step off the trail. I acknowledge her. I let her pass. Like all these things that just seem so over the top, like not necessary. And I just made a comment. I said, look, here's what he said. Hey, ladies that are listening, what else can I do? Like, bro, you know what you need to do? Continue to walk at your normal pace. Say good morning or hello when you walk by and get on with your day. I don't know why we think that we need to overcompensate as men. And what ends up happening is that we have a society riddled with passive, timid, scared, subservient men who can't just be normal. I mean, that's really what it is. Just be a normal person and you shouldn't have any issue navigating life.
Yeah. A guy like that, and I mean this sincerely. One of the best things a guy like that can do is go join an old school boxing gym, go to the closest inner city and find like the dingiest boxing gym, just get punched in the mouth. Just get punched in the mouth. That's what that guy needs. That's going to help him more than anything else. But I do think when you see guys like that, it's subconsciously, if it's not conscious, it's subconscious, a mating strategy. I think he thinks She's going to notice me. She wants this good boy, this nice boy. I'm going to be that. And so, and of course he realized, I'm sure that it doesn't work. No woman is ever like, oh, thank goodness. There's finally this hiker that lets me cross and bows to me as I walk past him. That's not attractive to women, but that's what he thinks is. And he's gotten that message from like we've said, from the media, probably from school, maybe even from his parents for his entire life, and he has no idea that he's wrong.
It reminds me of these women you'll see them at the airport, and they've got these pocket-sized puppy dogs, and they carry them around in their purse, and it's cute for a minute because the puppy dog needs her. She is the center, literally the center of that dog's universe, goes everywhere, feeds him treats. It's cute. It's fun. Like you have a puppy dog that needs you.
Yeah.
And I see this a lot with men is I think it's probably cute to some women initially, but to your point, it probably becomes very obnoxious and overwhelming very quickly. Yeah. And I don't think generally women are looking for that pocket-sized puppy dog. I think what they're looking for is a partner who listens to them, who cares about what they have to say, who makes them feel important, but also can stand on their own 2 feet and can lead when necessary and has direction and has purpose and has clarity and is virtuous. But that's not that puppy dog we're talking about. That's something entirely different. Yeah,
that level of need that a puppy dog would have. The way I've dealt with a lot of guys, I've run men's groups and all that, and when I see guys that are struggling with this, one thing I tell them that a lot of times will immediately wake them up is I say, imagine that you are acting that way in a relationship. Is it a natural conclusion for her to come to eventually that you're the best guy or that she's the best woman you can get, that you don't have any other options because you're treating her like this absolute, she's the center of your world. You do everything she asks. You're her puppy dog. She's going to come to a conclusion that you couldn't get anyone else but her. And how is that going to make her feel? Nobody wants to feel like you're the only option, especially not women. It's going to make her feel horrible. And that's when that resentment starts to creep in. Like, oh my gosh, this guy's such a loser that no other girl would want him, but I'm the one that wound up with him. And that's the road you're on when you start acting like that puppy dog who just bows and throws flowers on the ground as she walks past. She's going to start thinking, oh man, this guy, I'm the only thing he can get. That makes me feel really bad about myself. And then the resentment slowly starts to build.
I heard an interesting exercise the other day. I wish I could tell you where I heard it, but whoever it was said, you know what? It was GS Youngblood because he was on the podcast. I think it was him. And he said, in order to overcome a lot of this neediness that so many men have in their relationships with the opposite sex, they need to grieve the end of the relationship currently. And visualize that and process that. Like if this relationship weren't to work out, start grieving that a little bit right now because it deflates and takes away the power of how you might feel if that date ever comes. I thought that was a really interesting perspective because it puts it all into perspective. Hey, if it wasn't this, it would be something else. If it wasn't her, it would be someone else. I can appreciate what we have, but I know that this isn't going to be the end of the world. And I think a lot of guys would probably get a lot of value from just playing that out a little bit and realizing, hey, you know what? If this doesn't work out, maybe some heartbreak, definitely unfortunate, maybe some good memories that you had, and that was the extent of it, and you can still drive on with your life, and that's good. That's a good, healthy thing.
That's a powerful exercise. It's just psychologically, I think, anecdotally, I believe it works just from I've never tried it, but other people I've heard say I heard a guy on a podcast the other day was talking about how his dog just died. Family dog, had him for 12 years. But he was just kind of an anxious guy from day one. So in his head, for the entire 12 years, he's like a little bit worried every day that like this dog's going to die one day. I'm going to outlive this dog. My kids are going to be sad. It's going to be a really sad day. And it didn't own his life. It didn't control everything he did, but it was always he was playing out that grief a little bit and living and pre-grieving in a way, which I think is what you're talking about. And the day came last week when he said they had to put the dog down, and he felt none of the grief that he expected to feel, because he had already allowed himself to grieve the end of that relationship, and he understood. He had felt it already and simulated it, I guess, for lack of a better word, and it really helped him. And I think that same thing would hold true with what you're talking about. If you know you need to drastically change your relationship, and that's going to start with your behavior, well, then it ain't going to look the same. And you better be prepared for something very big happening to that relationship, and you're not doing yourself any favors by hiding from that.
Well, and I also think you're doing it when you're in a clear, rational space.
Yes.
You know, for example, if you get dumped or divorced or any of these things, you're going to be heartbroken, and your emotions are going to take over, and it's going to create a lot of fear and worry and concern and anxiety and depression and maybe even suicidal thoughts. But if you start to go through this process when things are good, you're in a different place. So you can think more clearly about it, and the emotion isn't as powerful as the rational thought of, hey, this would be horrible.
Right.
I would be heartbroken, and I would be okay. And here's what I would do, and here's how I would manage it. And same thing with this guy you're talking about with his dog. Yeah, horrible. You know, I've lost several dogs. One dog in particular, best dog I ever had. I still have a picture of my dog of that dog in the living room, because he was such an integral part of our family. It was horrible, but also you're going to have another dog.
Right.
Those are good memories to remember. You can pay a little bit of tribute to the time that you guys had together, because you do it in a rational place as opposed to an emotional one.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want your first time in a highly emotional or highly stressful situation. You don't want your first time thinking about that to be in the situation. It's like, imagine if you were in the World Series and it was, game 7 and the bases were loaded and you were down 4 runs and you were up to bat at the end of the game. You don't want that to be your first at bat. The guys that are successful in that situation are successful because they've done it 1,000, million, 100,000 times, and they've lived
Right.
in it. So you don't want to face this thing for the very first time while it's happening to you, because that 99 times out of 100, 999 times out of 1,000 will lead to that less than desirable outcome.
Yeah. Well, I think that's true also about things like martial arts. You know, you talked about it with this guy we were talking about earlier. It'd be best for him to go to a gym and get punched in the face. That's 100% true. I actually had a really interesting phone call with some of my guys, some groups that we run. And one of the guys, he's a longtime friend. He's an advocate. He's an asset in what we do. And I had said something, and he jumped on. He's like, this was a group call. He's like, hey, Ryan, don't do that. You got to stop doing that. And he called me out on something that I was doing. And I took it as it was intended. It was intended to be helpful. It was intended to call me up, not out. It was a good thing that he did it. But it wasn't intimidating for me because it was just words.
Right.
Number one, I knew where he was coming from. And number two, was just words. Man, you go into the jiu-jitsu gym or a boxing gym and you get smashed for an hour and a half, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days a week. A guy that says, don't do that, isn't going to wreck your universe.
Right.
Or somebody says something mean to you on Instagram isn't going to completely derail you, because you're used to getting smashed over here physically every single day by guys who are bigger, tougher, stronger than you. It puts things in a really interesting perspective when you're willing to step into voluntary hardship.
Bro, I'll never forget. I in my mid-20s, I got pretty into boxing. I wanted to get really good at it. And so I had a coach. I had a gym that I went to, and the coach was good. Like he had real students who were real fighters, who were paid fighters. But then I'm never gonna be that. Even then I knew, like, these guys are on a different level than I'll ever get to. But I thought I was getting pretty good, and like I was like, I'm an old guy will come in and say like, oh yeah, look at that guy, he looks good, and that would make me feel good. But one day he had a real MMA, one of his MMA guys who you look at him and he looks like a slob. I mean, this kid,
Totally non-intimidating.
Totally
Yeah.
non-intimidating. And he's kind of fat, and I was like lifting all the time. And I was pretty lean. And I was like, well, what if we just went around? Pull your punches. Don't kill me, because you probably could kill me. But let me see what happens. And, dude, within 30 seconds, this guy, he was pulling his punches and pulling his kicks. But there was one time in particular, I remember I was standing there, I had my face protected, and he came around with like a backwards, I don't even know the term for it, roundhouse kick that was going faster than anything I've ever seen. And he stopped his heel. He stopped his heel about a quarter inch from my chin. I could feel the momentum. I was like, dude, if you had connected that, my head you would have decapitated me. My head would have been gone. It'd been clear on the other side of the gym. And the guy just laughed. He was like, yeah, I know. And I was like, I think I'm done, man. I think I'm done with this. But you're so right, man, because after that, it's like, dude, nothing else is that freaking world shattering. Talk about shattering your ego. Like, this guy could kill me. This guy could kill me by looking at me, and you would look at him and never even know it. No. And that's why I talk about, if you're going to do deadlifts, do them when you wake up. Lift up 400 pounds in the morning, and the rest of the day isn't that hard.
Yeah. No, I like that concept of making things harder. I actually had a similar experience the first time I ever went to jiu-jitsu. We did a little instruction, and I had a little bit of a wrestling background, little teeny bit. I wrestled for a couple of years in high school, and our instructor says, all right, hey, Ryan, because I knew him a little bit, and he's like, hey, like, he kind of looked after me, and he's like, hey, I want you to roll with this guy. And I was like, okay, like, what do I do? He's like, just try not to get submitted. I'm like, okay, what's submitted? What do you mean? He's like, just try not to get to a place where you like want to quit. And then if you do, just tap. It's okay. Right. I'm like, okay. And I size this guy up. He's $140. He just kind of looks scrawny. I'm like, okay, I'll try not to get submitted by this guy. And within 30 seconds, he had his legs wrapped around my arm and neck, and he's choking me out in a triangle choke. And I'm tapping. I'm like, stop.
Yeah.
Dude, I'll never forget that. And that just opened up my world to how inadequate we are and how highly we think of ourselves.
Yeah.
Which is completely inaccurate. And I think putting yourselves in these situations paints a more realistic picture about your lack of capability. And that's very, very important to know.
Yeah. And it also, it's kind of inspiring too, I think, because like whenever I see somebody who's really good at something, I mean, like really good, to me, it's inspiring. And like these guys, the guy I'm talking about was probably not even, he was like a middling MMA guy. Like he's never going to be in a Dana White sanctioned fight. But he was light years ahead of me. Like I never in a million years, I just don't have the bone structure to even get that good. But you see guys who have put in that work, and you're like, man, there are so many ways that we can be great at stuff. There are so many things that we can be incredible at if we put in the effort and the dedication. And that to me is exciting. It's empowering. Like when I see a guy who's really, really good at public speaking, you can see it and you're like, man, this is good. This is good stuff that this guy's doing. Or a guy who's really great at a musical instrument, at piano, guitar. I'm a guitarist. But you see guys that just have it. And I never attribute that to natural. They're lucky. They were born with the right set of genetics. Like part of it is that, but most of it, sure, 80% plus, is they worked harder than me. They worked harder than anybody else, and that's why they're the best. And that to me is kind of exciting and kind of cool because this is a video game. In that case, if that's what you're telling me, it's just I put in the work and I get better and I level up. I'm down with that. Let's do it.
I think that's a really healthy way to look at it. A lot of guys tend to look at it, to your point, and think, oh, well, the reason that guy's good at that is because he got lucky or because he comes from wealth or he had this one connection that he got lucky with. And look, I'm not going to discount that. If you and I grew up if you grew up in poverty and, music wasn't introduced in your house, were your parents musicians by chance?
Yeah, I got introduced to music very young. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. That's you didn't earn that. No, that's luck. Right. Yep. So the fact that you got introduced to music, your parents may have been musicians, that's a bit of luck. But man, how many people have those positive circumstances, but still do nothing with it? So you got to be really careful in attributing some level of success to just, hey, they got lucky. Because if that's the case, then you just have to sit on your hands and twiddle your thumbs, hoping that your ship will come in at some point. And that's a horrible, horrible way to live life.
Yeah, because it never comes, by the way.
No.
Nobody's ever knocked on my door and handed me a big box full of money. Never happened, and I'm not ever expecting it to happen. Ed McMahon doesn't do that anymore. But yeah, man, that's right, and it's a good feeling. I think it's a good. I would never. One of the most helpful heuristics I think about is potential. It's like we're kind of all born with a certain set of ingredients. I think about like a flower in a pot outside, a seed. It's kind of how we start. The way I think about it is we have this set of ingredients, and inside of it, it's when the egg meets the sperm. Where there's we got these ingredients. They could go a million different ways though. Once it germinates and once it starts growing, and if you got a flower in a pot, it's got this potential. It has the potential to be this tall and bloom this big and be the prize winning flower. But if it doesn't get watered right, if it gets too much sun or not enough sun, or you neglect it, or I don't know, a bird comes along and eats it, it's not going to reach its potential. And that's how I think about us as the human condition is, we've all got these set of ingredients, and all we can do is try to maximize how those ingredients present themselves through our conscious effort and through our habits as we go throughout life. And that's what potential is to me. And that's something that I think about all the time is what I'm doing right this second maximizing my ingredients, or is it insulting my ingredients? And I want to always try to check myself and say, well, I got to do this group of this. If I do these 6 things every day, then I'm pretty good. If I miss them, I'm pretty bad.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. Yeah, just that level of potential. I think this is also ties into comparison trap. A lot of guys will look at what other people do and they'll use it as a mechanism to deflate themselves.
Dude,
he's better. I'll never be that good. We all do, right? Like, he's got it, I don't. Like, that guy's incredible. He's talented. I'll never have that. And that's a very poor way to compare yourself to other people. But there's another positive, healthy side of comparison. If I see what you do, for example, in your life, whether it's guitar or martial arts or creating the community that you guys have, and I look at it, and instead of being deflated, I'm inspired by it. Oh man, look what Harrison's creating. Oh, look, that's an interesting way to address that. Oh, here's an interesting way to reach new people. And I use it not as something to deflate where I currently am, but use it as inspiration and fuel to lift me up. That's a really positive way to use comparison. So I would never want a man to just assume, because we hear it all the time, that comparison trap is horrible. It's not. Comparing yourself to other people can actually be very inspiring, but you have to do it with the right mindset.
That's right. Did you post about this recently? Because I want to say I saw you.
I don't know.
That's a fire post. It's so true, man. Like, it's one of those things. Oh, I know what you posted about that's similar that I saw. And I was just like, hell yeah, Ryan nailed it. It was don't worry about what people think about you is BS. It was because, like, yeah, of course you should freaking worry about what people think about you if they're the right people, because those people are going to make decisions that impact how you what happens to you. Why would you not care what people think about you? And I think this is the same kind of thing. Is like this common trope is like, oh, I don't care what people think about me. Don't compare yourself to others. Compare yourself to yourself. I do believe the best comparison is, am I better than I was yesterday? But there's a lot of power in learning from great people, from great men of the past. I mean, if I do anything, if I read anything outside of what I'm working on, it's trying to learn something from somebody who I admire. And like, whoa, how did they get there? And that could be somebody who's a few steps ahead of me, or somebody who's light years ahead of me. That is a very productive form of comparison. But I struggle with the other form too, which is like, man, so and so started after me, and his business is X million already. What am I doing? And all this stuff too. And that's the really poisonous part. Instead, what you should do is, damn, so and so hit 5 million in year 2. How? What did he do?
How? Exactly.
And you try to reverse engineer it.
That's such a powerful question. It's like, We always talk about, oh, that guy. Well, I don't need to be a dead horse. That guy got lucky. It's like, don't worry about that. Just ask him how he did it.
Yep. And
Just figure out how he did it.
Most of them would be thrilled to talk to you about it because it's been everything they've thought about for years. And so, of course, they would love to talk to you about it.
Let's shift gears a little bit. I want to go back to your account, Save Your Sons. When you say that, again, and I think we kind of hit on this in the beginning, but there's a group of people who say, yes, hell yes, we need to save our sons. Like, this is important. And there's probably a faction of people who say save them from what? You know, like, what do you mean? Like, we live in the best times and we're so progressive and we need to change things and there's nothing to save them against. We need to save them against the old way of doing things, their traditional way of doing things. Why did you call your account Save Your Sons? And what does that mean to you specifically? What are we saving them from?
So the reason I called it that very, very simply was I started it about 2 months after my first little boy was born. I now have 2 boys with a baby girl on the way in like 3 weeks.
Congrats.
So I'm
awesome.
about to be.
Congrats, man.
Thank you. You know, God willing, everything stays safe. She'll be here middle of June. And I started the Save Your Sons account because you probably remember when your kids are born, as men, we get this weird thing of like, you look around and you take stock of your life and you take stock of the world and you're like, what kind of world, what kind of life do I want them to have? And I think that's what legacy really means or it's a piece of what legacy means is what do I want to create for my kids? And I looked back at my own experience, which I've touched on in my early 20s, kind of shedding these lies that had been, shedding the wool that had been pulled over my eyes. And I wanted to save them from that. And I wanted to do everything I could with my time on this earth to figure out what's actually true. Because I think I hold truth as a virtue above everything else, pretty much, almost everything else. I want to know what's right, what's true, what's actually true. And I believe that it is very objective almost in every case. So I wanted to create a catalog of information that I needed when I was in my teens, early 20s, that would have saved me a lot of pain and saved me a lot of time and would have helped me find at least what I think today is true a lot sooner. And I think a lot of what, we talked about this for a minute before we got on, but I really try to stay out of the like culture war stuff, which I know people are like, but you're freaking Save Your Sons, you're culture war by default, and you have this, which maybe I am, but I don't want to be a pundit. I don't want to be a guy on Fox News talking about they're destroying our country. Like I don't think that's how I make the change that I want to see in the world. I think the way I make the change in the world that I want to see in the world is very, very narrowly defined in what kind of example can I set for my boys, and to the extent that I can share that example with other men out there, and I think I'm doing most of the things right. How can I inspire them to follow that example and have similar good outcomes in their lives? And so that's what I want to save. I did really want to save my sons. I did want to save them from what I saw as a lot of lies about, the agenda. I didn't want them being confused about whether or not they were really men or what does that mean. Like, no, you're boys. You're going to be men. Here's what that means. I wanted to save them from that confusion and from those lies, but I also wanted to give them as close as I have to a field manual for what I think is a productive way for a man to lead his life and to live his life. And that's almost all of the content I put out goes through those lenses, or it's just a meme. I think it's funny. And I'll put those out too.
Well, yeah, and I don't know if I don't know if you're anything like me, but occasionally I get this wild hair where I just kind of like to rile people up. Yeah. So occasionally I'll drop one of those in there and people lose their minds, and I think it's funny. Like I'm not lying. I actually believe what I'm saying, but I also think it's funny how riled up people get at times.
Oh my gosh, dude, it's wild. I'll look at your comments every now and then. I'm like, dude, Ryan gets the, like, there's some stuff on yours. I get it on X more than Instagram, or maybe I just don't read my Instagram comments at all. But on X, dude, I'll say, like, you could say anything, and somebody will come in there and just be like, whoa, and like the vitriol and the anger that they have toward just a guy, dude. I'm in my basement office at my house in North Carolina. Like, come on, like I'm not a threat to you. I'm just saying what's on my mind. But it's wild, dude, how people can get triggered at things. I one of the reasons I stay away from it is another heuristic I have about life is that energy is so important. And what I choose, how I choose to spend my energy is going to have second, third, fourth, fifth order effects on not only how the day goes, but how the future goes. And every single thing you do is in some way an expenditure of energy, which is a limited resource. So I don't want to spend even an ounce of it fighting with some nobody who's pissed off in my comments, because that's energy I'm never getting back. That's time I'm never getting back, and that's energy I'm never getting back until I recharge the next day, or recharge however I recharge. And so I try to be, I fail too, dude. Sometimes they'll say something and I'm just like, get out of here. Of course. And then you're like, you call them out and you feel good for 5 seconds, and then you're like, should I have done that? Like, and that's just what so I try to stay away from it, not always successfui.
Yeah, a long time ago, I instituted a rule, and I follow it to varying degrees. But the rule is I have a one response maximum. That's so good. If somebody makes a comment back, I can say my piece. I can say what I need to say, get whatever I need to get out, and then I'm not supposed to comment after. I'm not saying I do a very good job at it, but I know when I follow that rule, it actually works really well, because some people will say, and you'll say this, like, hey, don't expend your energy. But also, I think some of those comments that I might make back to somebody who's responding are not just me airing my grievances, but I think somebody else might hear it and say, oh, that's a really good point. Yeah. Or, hey, here's a guy who's willing to stand on his own 2 feet. He's willing to stand by what he says. He's willing to defend it in a respectful way. And I don't always get that right either. But I think there's value in that as well. But yeah, that one response maximum, when applied, serves me very, very well. I had a guy the other day, he said, I was talking about transgender issues, and he said, what if you had one of your sons said they were transgender? Would you still love them and care about them or affirm them or something like that? I said, look, those are two different issues. I can love my son or my daughter, and I can still not be accepting of their lifestyle or their choices. Like, those are two different things. So let's not conflate the two and assume that just because I don't agree with somebody, it automatically means I don't love them. I think that's actually one of the biggest problems in society today, is that people say that all the time. Oh, you hate, you're a fill in the blankophobe.
Right.
No, I just don't agree with it. And I wish them all the best. I'm not afraid of them. I want the best for them. I want them to succeed and have a fulfilling, enjoyable life, but I still don't agree with it. And there's nothing you could share with me, no data, no science, none of this other stuff, science,
that's
in quotations. That you were talking about earlier. Okay, so I do have a question though, with Save Your Sons. You've got a daughter on the way. She's coming in about 3 weeks, it sounds like. Is there going to be a Save Your Daughters account? And if there was, is it different than Save Your Sons?
To the extent that, it's funny how people ask me, like, where's Save Your Daughters? Like, I think a lot of guys get triggered. Girl dads, maybe cool guys that I would like, still are like, what are you doing, dude? Like, why aren't you talking about daughters too? And the way my answer to that has always been twofold. First, I only have boys, which is about to be not true. But second, I am a man. This is what I know. And I do not, I like to think I understand women's psychology pretty well. I understand kind of what motivates them and what makes them feel safe and happy and fulfilled. But I'm not going to sit here and tell women how to live their lives. I want my wife to do that, and I want to set an example for my daughter of the type of man that I would be thrilled for her to wind up with. And so it's a different message. I shy away when guys, maybe this is some of my old programming that I hadn't quite shed yet, but I don't think it is. I don't like it when guys are like, here's how women should live. There's plenty of smart women out there who are living great, virtuous, happy, healthy lives that can teach younger women the same way I can teach younger men. And I think it's much healthier for younger women to learn from that example than it would be from me, some bonehead being like, you should really do this. Like, I've never lived that life. I've never lived that experience. It would be pretty presumptuous of me to go in and try to dictate that. But what I can do is I know damn well what kind of man is good for a woman. And I know damn well what kind of man will provide a woman with an environment that will make her most prosperous. And I know damn well how to set that example. And so that's what I'm going to be doing. Those are the conversations I'm going to be having with my daughter as she gets older, is about what to look for in a man. But in terms of how, how to, I don't think self-improvement, for example, has quite the same effect on women as it does on men. So I'm not going to be out here being like, women, you need to do these 5, 10 things. It's just different. And it's not something that I would ever pretend to be an authority on. But I do want to set that example, and to the extent that will be reflected in my content, that'll be how I'm thinking about it.
So let's flip the script a little bit. Do you feel like there's any sort of space for a woman to interject some of her thoughts and ideas into the masculinity manliness conversation?
I mean, that's how I got to that eventually. Was I don't want to sit here and talk to women about how to be a woman. One of the things that got me there was because I would be pissed. I think that's what got us into this mess in the first place, is we allowed masculinity to be defined by people who have no conception of it. Hey, women. You can't tell, if you're a rock, you can't tell a cactus how to be a cactus because you're a rock. And we're so different that it I would bristle thoroughly at, and the evidence supports it. When women tell you what they want, that's not really what they wind up going for most of the time, because they don't understand what it's like to be a man. They don't understand even oftentimes what makes men feel fulfilled. I wouldn't expect them to. And I feel the same way. I have some theories. I think everything equal, most women are happy when they get to be a mom. I think that makes women feel really good. I think they have a lot of biological incentives pushing them to take on that role. But my role is not to tell them that they need to go do that. That's not who I am, and that's not. I don't believe in that. In that sort of me telling women what to do. I would much rather them get that from somebody who has lived it. And at the same way, if a woman tells me what it means to be a man, I'm going to be like, sorry, I just don't think you really get it. And that's fair.
Yeah, I agree with that. I wanted to bring that question up because I know that's one question I receive, and I think it's worthy of addressing. I agree with what you just said. I think what also is important to notice or know or at least identify is that the fact that men and women don't get each other is not a bug. It's a feature.
Yeah.
You'll hear guys all the time like, I don't get women. Well, no shit. You're not supposed to. If you understood women, you probably wouldn't have as big a need for a woman in your life because you would see it from her perspective. And it's the same thing with women. Women are like, oh man, like I don't get, it's so difficult. Yeah, you don't get it by design. That's why we're supposed to work together, because we bring something that you don't have and you bring something we don't have. And although we don't always understand each other, we do work harmoniously together when we decide we're going to march hand in hand towards this objective or towards this outcome.
Yeah, that's a much more eloquent way of putting it than I did. But it's so true, man. Like, to make water, what do you need? You need hydrogen and oxygen, right? Hydrogen isn't out here thinking, man, I know exactly what I need. I'm looking for oxygen. Hello, is oxygen out here? Oxygen isn't out here being like, I need hydrogen, and hydrogen needs to have these 5 attributes. No, but when they join together, when they bond, they form the basis of all life on Earth, which is water. And I feel like there's a lot of similarities in what you're talking about. It's like we can try to armchair psychologists how women think, and we can get a lot of it right, and they can do the same thing to us. But the reality is, what we are is we're meant to form a greater whole that's so much greater than the sum of our parts. And you see it every day in the world, and that's the reality of being alive, is that when you find that right person who can add that dimension to your life, you are no longer, you could add up every good thing about me. It's exponentially improved because of my wife. Every good thing about me wouldn't be anything compared to what we are together. And she's the woman I want telling my daughter what it means, what it's all about. And I want to be the one setting the example, and vice versa. For my boys, I want to be telling my boys, this is what it's like. This is what to expect. When you turn 18, here's how the world's going to treat you. It's going to treat you pretty bad, and it's going to want to know what you can do for it. And here's how you produce. And then I want them to look to their mother as this great example of what it means to be a good woman and somebody that I would be proud for them to wind up with if they were like their mother.
Yeah, I think that's well said, man. Well, hey, I know you got a lot going on. You got Sherwood Kids, which from where I sit is a streaming service specifically for kids, wholesome, good, powerful content. Can you talk a little bit about that, and then also let the guys know where to connect with you and learn more about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, man, absolutely. Sherwood Kids is a business that I went into, started with a friend of mine, business partner named Jess, who is a real smart guy who also has 2 little boys. And both of us were sitting around, and we've long come to the conclusion that one of the issues, I've said this probably a dozen times since we started talking, Ryan, was that media is a problem. Because if media is giving kids a message that we don't agree with or that we think is harmful, media is so powerful that message starts to become true. What not really true, but true to the person perceiving that
People
message.
adopt it as truth. Right.
And I saw that all the time in kids media, and we don't need to get into the specifics. Your listeners understand what I'm talking about when I say that kids media is, in a lot of ways, really, really, I think, damaging. And whether it's the content of the media or just the style of the media, the pacing, the frenetic addiction, the constant dopamine drip of cutscenes every 2 seconds. And so we said, well, what change? This whole thing is about how can I change the world for the better? What kind of change do I want to see in the world? Well, to me, I want to create a media alternative for my kids that I think is good, that I think is healthy for them, that has messages that I think are healthy, that has that is created in a way that I think is healthy, so that it isn't addictive, so that it isn't like binging on junk food. We talk about this. It's whole foods. It's real foods. Entertainment can be good if it's the right stuff. And that's what we've created with Sherwood. So if you got young kids, even if they're older, it's really for 3 to 16 is kind of the right, which is most of childhood. We'll find a lot of stuff on Sherwood that they like. 4,000 titles. There's books, audiobooks, movies, videos, shows, podcasts, anything you want. It'll replace YouTube. It'll replace Disney Plus. If you're sick of that stuff, that's why we made Sherwood. SherwoodKids.com. And I made your listeners a code. It's OOM.
Okay.
So if they use OOM,
Perfect.
then use the code OOM. Go to SherwoodKids.com. Use the code OOM. You'll get a discount too. It's already like $8 a month, but your discount will cut that down to like $7 a month or something. And you're never gonna look back, because the stuff on there. It's the second you watch it with your kid. What happened to me was I started using Sherwood. As soon as it was built, Jess came to me. He's like, I got this thing. I was like, let me try it with my own son. And we're guilty. We'd set them in front of YouTube sometimes and whatever. And when you turn off YouTube, parents experience this all the time. You turn off YouTube and it comes with a tantrum. Your kids will lose their mind. I want more. I want to watch another one. Don't turn it off. Don't turn it off. And what's happening is they're getting dopamine withdrawal. The same thing that's happening to a crackhead when you take away their crack pipe. They're getting dopamine withdrawal because it's so intense what they're watching, and the colors and the sound and the movement. But when you watch Sherwood, this has happened. I've repeated this 20 dozen times by now. Watch Sherwood with my boy, my older boy, and you turn it off, and he says, all right, what's next? What are we going to do? No more tantrum. It's like magic. It's incredible. So check it out, SherwoodKids.com, code OOM. We'll save you some money if you're listening. And if you want to ask me any questions about it or whatever, I'm much fastest on X in the DMs. So you should just send me a DM on X at Save Your Sons, or you can send me an Instagram message to save.your.sons on Instagram. I usually see those pretty good too. And love to chat with anybody about any of this stuff. And I'm just so grateful for the chance, Ryan. Thank you, man.
Awesome, brother. We'll keep up the great work. We'll keep promoting as you have things come up. I want to make sure I'm introducing our audience to the work that you're doing. I used to be one of those guys where it's like everything's a competition and we're after the same people. We're working to impact the same people, and I feel like we're in a position of abundance where there's a lot of good people doing good things, and the more resources we have, the better off the world will be. So keep it up, man. Appreciate you.
I agree with that 1,000%, man. Thank you.